What is up, everybody? Welcome to a very impromptu edition of Shoot the Gap, the IDP Fantasy Football podcast here on the Fantasy and Frames Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jorge Edwards. With me, we got Justin Taylor. And we know it's not Wednesday, it's not 10 p.m., but we, things kind of got in the way this week, but we wanted to make sure
computer malfunction. My computer went down on us, so we had to move things back. It's been a crazy week as everything got moved back that I had to do this week because all of a sudden my computer just quit charging out of nowhere and like everything just died on me. I had to take it to get it looked at and fixed. So I appreciate you moving things back for me. I told everybody else, I was like, sorry about everything getting out so late this week. We had to skip the hockey show. I did end up getting in the betting show, but it's been kind of a crazy week.
Dude, it's been crazy on my end as well. I know exactly what you mean. But we figure, you know what, let's get this show out there. We got some stuff to talk about for those IDP fanatics that are tuning in. Got Jamie in the chat already. Hey, it's Wednesday night finally. I know.
It's Wednesday, right? We can just pretend. We'll pretend like it's Wednesday on a Saturday.
Exactly. And in fact, it's earlier than we would be on Wednesday. So it works out nicely for everybody. But before we get into all the rigmarole of IDP for week 12, let's get into this. So as I'm pouring this mug full of Coke Zero, which I sure hope has caffeine in it, let's say, JT, for tonight's episode, because it's a special airing on a Saturday night, that we can just basically go into whatever tangent we want to and talk about anything. And the first tangent, all right, sounds good. The first tangent I want to go to is that you and I earlier this afternoon were like, yeah, let's do the podcast like around 9 Eastern, 8 Central. Cool. And you and I both, like 15 minutes ago, remembered that we were doing this podcast at, the time.
I've been knee deep, neck deep in college football all day, watching games. All my teams were on today, some exciting games. And so I wrote an article for DLF earlier this morning that was late. That was supposed to be out a couple days ago, but I got that into them late because of my computer issues. So I was knocking that out. I was watching all my teams. Illinois played early. Missouri played this afternoon. Syracuse played early. Colorado played this afternoon. So I've been watching like games all day, and then all of a sudden you hit me with a text. I was like, oh, it's like I knew I have like 5 things I have going on, and I'm like, I knew I had something else that I was forgetting about. Like one of my main bartenders, it's her birthday tonight, so I was just texting my girlfriend. I'm like, are we gonna go over there? Like when you get off work, like what's going on? She's like, yeah, you should probably take a shower, like get ready, whatever you got to do just in case we go. And then like you text me like right after that, I was like, oh, I knew there was something else I had to do tonight, so.
Well, I promise that we'll get through this in plenty of time for you to go celebrate. I promise. I was, 3 or 4 beers deep into the evening, thinking, "Woo!" I had just been on Fantasy Points data suite for like the entire day, looking up stats, getting ready for the Fantasy and Frames kickoff show, which will start tomorrow at 9 p.m. Eastern, where we cover all of your start and sit questions. Dynasty questions, IDP questions, whatever questions you have for fantasy football, we're going to be there, as well as doing our usual thing. So you should expect Nate Markham, Keith Fleming, myself, Colby Conway, and David Ibrahim should be joining the show. So it should be a jam-packed show. JT, I don't know how busy you are tomorrow, but you're more than welcome to jump on if you have time.
We'll see. I got to get up and drive to Indy for the Lions Colts game tomorrow. So I'm meeting my cousin, who's the other Steelers fan, is the reason I'm a Steelers fan. He actually had a trip set up before the season, a huge golf trip in Florida. When the schedule came out, the Steelers game, he was like, "You got it. You're not going to believe this, but I have this golf trip already set up." So he couldn't go to the Steelers game. I was like, "Well, we got to figure out a different game." Well, he grew up on the Ohio-Indiana border, or excuse me, Ohio-Michigan border. My mom's family, his dad is all from Michigan. Grew up in Alabama, but they all moved to Michigan when they were younger. So he grew up Michigan fan, grew up a Lions fan as well, just because all our family rooted for all them. So I was like, why don't you come to the Lions game? He's like, oh, it's a great idea. I'll come to the Lions game. So kind of get the backup team in. His backup team, the Lions. My backup team behind the Steelers is the Colts. So it's going to work out. So hopefully we get a good game tomorrow. Hopefully the Colts make it interesting.
Yeah, so folks, when you tune in tomorrow for the kickoff show, I will definitely have some thoughts about this game because in some respects, I don't think it's going to be as big of a cakewalk as others think it will be. So if you thought Detroit was just going to go all over Indianapolis, I don't think it's going to be that easy. I think Indianapolis can put up a fight, but hear more about that tomorrow morning. We got a question here from Jamie in the chat. Would you start Henry To'oTo'o or Nakobe Dean? So crazy, right? We look at the snap percentages from last week, and it was actually Devin White who kind of usurped Henry To'oTo'o last week. I don't know what to make of that, to be honest with you. I still have faith in Henry To'oTo'o. I don't know why Devin White was automatically thrown in there. He's been like pretty inefficient as a tackler, so I don't know what the rationale there was. There an injury? Was there not? I mean, there's nothing reported on the injury reports, the NFL injury reports. You look at the tackle efficiency for To'oTo'o last week, 26.9. That is ridiculous. That is ridiculous. Ridiculous, and that's another way to describe it. Good. Good tackle efficiency, elite tackle efficiency.
Yep.
Great dominated snaps. Therefore, with that uncertainty, JT, would you hate me if I said Nakobe Dean?
I'm absolutely saying Nakobe Dean. That's my guy. He's actually one of my plays this week. We've actually seen him stay healthy, even with Braun next to him, like just absolutely being the stud of IDP this year. The huge upset of nobody saw him coming. Dean has actually started to be that player we thought he would be coming out of Georgia. Had 10 tackles, 8 solos last week against the Commanders. So he's in the mix. Even though he's not technically their number one, he's still getting a ton of snap share. He's on the field pretty much all the time. I'm loving Nakobe Dean. He's actually one of my plays this week. I am all in playing Nakobe Dean this week. I think it's a nice matchup for him. The Eagles, Commanders are running the ball. The Eagles, the Rams are going to want to run the ball, even though they're a passing team as well with Stafford and everything else. I think this is a decent matchup here. I think Dean's going to be in the mix all day here against the Rams in the night game. So I'm on to Nakobe Dean on this one.
Jamie's like, To'oTo'o got me 15 points on 31% of snaps. I mean, it helps when you have that close to 30% tackle efficiency, which is ungodly heard of. But good for him, but bad for him that Devin White kind of took those snaps away. That's something to monitor as we get closer to the fantasy playoffs, whether To'oTo'o is somebody that you can count on going forward. We got some injury stuff. We got some news to talk about. So, we have a segment for that. Wait a second. I knew we had a segment for that, so glad to have that ready to go. So it's news and notes, folks. And as of right now, let's talk about some injuries, some people that are out. Starting with Nick Bosa for the San Francisco 49ers going against the Green Bay Packers. That kind of helps Jordan Love a little bit. We don't have to worry about Nick Bosa breathing that in the Packers offense. But is there anybody, along that defensive line that you're concerned with
I tell you what, there is so many injuries on the Niners in this game. It could get ugly. I mean, they've got injuries on defense. They've got injuries on offense. I mean, it sounds like Brock Purdy's not going to play. This thing's going to get ugly. They're going to need CMC to have a monster performance. I think Fred Warner is going to have to make 1 million tackles in this game, and they're going to have to hope for some turnovers from their secondary. I was really excited about this game. To me, this was like the turnaround game for the Niners. Is like, hey, if you show up this week, you play against the Packers It's not been the season they thought they would have. But you're like, okay, if they beat the Packers, I even said within the last week, I still thought they were one of the top 3 or 4 teams in the NFC. Now you get all these injuries. If they lose the Packers in this game, it's gonna be hard to keep backing them at this point. But man, yeah, with Bosa out with the injury, there's not somebody I would just plug and play for him. Drake Jackson's still out on the other side. Oh, like man, it's like Fred Warner or bust. I feel like right now for the Niners this week.
Yeah, I mean, even with Devondre Campbell also playing 100% of snaps and having the slightly higher tackle efficiency, I'm not trusting Devondre Campbell. I don't care that the past 2 weeks he's had a efficient game or two. Feel like you can do better. I would trust Henry To'oTo'o over Devondre Campbell, even though To'oTo'o has the 31% snap share last week. To be perfectly honest with you. Will, what's going on? Welcome back. And thank you for joining us on a special edition of Shoot the Gap here on Saturday. He says, time to cut the bait with Nick Bolton. Cashman a better play. I'm going to let you handle this one, JT, because I know this
I will jump in. And since we're not going in order like we usually do, since Jorge said, hey, let's just kind of free flow, you guys are actually jumping in and asking all the questions of everything I was going to talk about anyway. So this is a kind of a perfect setup here. This one hurts me. Nick Bolton's one of my favorite players. He's a Mizzou guy, one of my all-time favorite players to come out of Missouri. He has just not been the guy. I'm not cutting him. I'm not getting rid of him. He's not been great this year, but that's because you were probably, if you drafted him or wherever you took him, if you're in a dynasty, you were expecting him to be your LB1. You thought he was going to lead your team. He had that 170 tackle season a couple seasons ago, and you're hoping to get that again and again. Just hasn't been the case this year. Right now for Bolton, he's currently LB 26 according to Fantasy Pro, scoring 115.7 points this year, only 11.6 points per game. So again, not terrible. 11.6 is nothing, to sneeze at. He's still, right in there as your LB2. He's just not that absolute stud that you were expecting. When you picked him or traded for him or drafted him, it's not the spot. And now on top of that, I will talk about this just a little bit. Bolton has actually had one of the worst schedules in the entire league for linebackers this year for IDP purposes. So far, and going against teams that give up the most tackles per opposing linebackers, he has not faced anyone in the top 10, and he's only faced one team in the top 15. So that's top half of the league on points given up to linebackers. He's only faced one this season. So just not a lot of good matchups for the Chiefs as far as linebacker matchups for them. Another bad one this week. You think, they're going against the Panthers. They're going to run the ball. Their offense is bad. This should be a good spot for him. But Panthers 28th in the league. Top half as far as not giving up tackles to opposing linebackers, which is a little bit surprising when I saw that number. So I'm actually fading Nick Bolton this week. I'm not getting rid of him, but I would temper my expectations. The chances are with all the bye weeks, this is one of those monster bye weeks that drive me insane, where 6 teams on bye week. I don't know how the NFL can't even this out. How can you not have it where it's like 4 teams a week instead of these huge 6 teams or 2-team weeks? Drives me nuts. So you're probably playing Bolton if you got him, because the chances are you have a bunch of guys on bye and you don't have a better option. If you do have really good options, or in your league that only starts like 1 or 2 defensive linebackers, if I have another stud, I'm probably playing him over Bolton this week. Again, it's not like he's been terrible. He's still top 30. You expect him to be a top 10 guy, and he's been on that verge of top 30. So low end LB2. Don't get rid of him. Don't trade him yet. If you get somebody that really loves him like I do and thinks that he can bounce back, maybe you look to trade him. Maybe if you're in a dynasty, you can trade him. Again, even in redraft, I'm probably not dropping him at this point. Again, he's been disappointing, but we've got to realize disappointment doesn't mean he's not still a solid player. He's just not the top 5 guy you were hoping you were getting at linebacker.
Yeah, in fact, you look at he also mentioned is Blake Cashman a better play? To be honest with you, I think you should temper expectations on both of those players just because they're at the bottom of the league in fantasy points allowed for Fantasy Pro scoring via Fantasy Six Packs IDP points allowed grid right there. So something to pay attention to there.
Now, I will say, if we're bringing up Cashman, I'm not sure if I'm playing Cashman over Bolton, but if I have Cashman or Ivan Pace, or I'm worried about Cashman's the play over Ivan Pace. Even though Ivan Pace has been really good when he's been in games, he just hasn't got a ton of snap share. Now, the difference for him is when he gets 96% snap share or better, which has been the games that Cashman's been out, he's averaged over 16 fantasy points per game in Fantasy Pro scoring, which is fantastic. But in games that Cashman usually plays, he gets less than 70% of snaps, and his average drops down to around 10 points per game. So risky play to play Ivan Pace. You're going to need him to be super efficient with him, the lack of snaps. Last week he got 64% of snaps and just got 4 assisted tackles. That was it. So I still think Cashman's a decent play. I don't love him against the Bears, but he's a better play than Ivan Pace. Ivan Pace is a guy right now. I just think you got to fade until as long as Cashman's in the lineup and the snap share stays where it is, you're going to look like a Tutu situation where he's going to play like 50 or 60% of snaps, but you're going to need him to be super ultra productive and get you a bunch of tackles on the few snaps he's in.
Right on. Let's see. We got Randy here in the chat. He's in a league where you only start one defensive lineman and have limited bench spots. And the question is, he's saying, would you ever stick with Dexter Lawrence rest of season, who he just picked up, and drop Nick Bosa, or do I need to keep Bosa by any means necessary? Yeah. So go ahead.
I mean, don't you think Lawrence is the play moving forward right now? I mean, he's been absolutely phenomenal so far this year, but man, and it's tough in any world to drop Nick Bosa.
I would have to know who your other defensive linemen are.
Yeah, he's saying he's got limited bench spots. Yeah, so my guess is he's got offensive guys that he needs to fill up the bench spots, which I'm in a couple of leagues like this where we only have like 4 or 5 bench spots. And so you're literally dropping defensive guys if they're on bye week or they get hurt, because you have to save the bench spots for the offensive players, for wide receivers or running backs or backup quarterbacks. So that is a toughie. If it's redraft, it wouldn't kill you to drop Bosa and redraft, but I would absolutely hate to do it in any kind of dynasty league.
So let's go back to weeks 5 through 7. You got versus Seattle, 4 tackles, 3 sacks. You go to week 6 versus Cincinnati, 3 tackles, 1 sack. You go to Philadelphia, 5 tackles, 2 sacks. That was the end of his double-digit fantasy point production. Then you go back to the 3 after that at Pittsburgh, only 4 tackles, 0 sacks. Against Washington, 6 tackles, right? 6 tackles, 0 sacks. And at Carolina last week, 4 tackles, 0 sacks. So he's one of those guys, obviously, interior defensive lineman. He's very sack dependent. The tackles, I would imagine that they would be there with teams that run the ball a lot. Go figure. Cincinnati, Philadelphia, Pittsburgh. Seattle, Cincinnati, Philadelphia, teams that do have proficient running games. The game against Washington, I'm kind of that's the head scratcher right there. But going against Tampa Bay this week, I think he has a bounce back this week. But to go rest the season, well, you know what? Tampa, I think, is a good one against Dallas, against New Orleans. Baltimore would be the tricky one. But then against Atlanta and Indianapolis,
he's been the one player on the Giants that you've been like, oh, he's been playing his ass off all year. He's looked great. Like I said, I hate to drop Bosa in redraft and Dynasty, but redrafts, if you're super limited in spots and you think you can go with Lawrence the rest of the way, I don't totally hate it. I mean, I can't believe I'm saying that, but Bosa's been one of those guys. He's gotten a decent amount of pressures this year, but man, he has not gotten home. There's a ton of games where I'm like, I think he's got a half sack or a sack, a partial something, and then like I look at the stats and nothing for him, and I'm like, what? He didn't get credit for that? It's happening like at least 4 or 5 games this year because I've got him on a few teams. Like, man, I just look at the stats for him at the end of games sometimes, and they're disappointing. I feel like he's in the mix when I watch games, but then I look at the stat line afterwards. He's got nothing. Right. Kills me.
Yeah, I think I would make that play, to be honest with you. I mean, I will say this. I never want to be somebody who says drop one of the best players at their position. If there's a way you can hold on to him and Lawrence this week and get rid of your wide receiver 4 or 5 or running back 4 or 5, AKA the players that you're not really inserting into your lineups anyhow, do it. But I will say that Dexter Lawrence does have a very favorable rest of the season schedule minus the Baltimore game that you can kind of hang your hat on for fantasy purposes. So I'm not going to tell you to pull the trigger, but I will say you're not exactly in a bad spot with Dexter Lawrence. And that was my way of weaseling out of that question. Thank you, Randy, for tuning in. Let's see. This is
a good question from Randy here.
All right. He's in my league. James Sherwood is the top 3 scoring linebacker so far. Would you rather roster him or TJ Watt rest of the season? So here's the thing, right? We're talking about, CJ Mosley has just been battling this injury for the past few weeks. I want to say it's been a month now. But then he came back. But even though he's come back, he's been playing in limited snaps. Let me pull up his most recent game there. Well, yeah. So Quincy Williams, 100%. Sherwood, 98.6% last week. I like the steady tackle volume of an inside linebacker.
Yeah. If you have to play Watt at linebacker, that hurts his value. If he doesn't count as like a DN, like on my fantasy league, or if he's not on like a sleeper where he's a DN / D-line / linebacker, if you have to play him at linebacker, I'm in a couple leagues. I'll make the same comparison. I'm in a couple leagues where Micah Parsons has to be played as a linebacker. He cannot be played as an edge rusher or a D end. He has to be playing a linebacker, and I find myself sitting in a ton of weeks because we do not get huge points for sacks in this league. So that would be if this is more of a tackle heavy league, or if you're in like a league, I'm in one league. It's like it's a point for a sack and it's a point for a tackle. Take the tackles, man. If you're not going to get any kind of benefit with Watt with the tackle advantage there, if it's not anywhere between 4 to 6 points for a sack. It's like you just said with Bosa, you hate to do it, but it's like you got to play the points. You got to play Sherwood, especially if this is a redraft league and not a dynasty. But again, I've also been in dynasty leagues where they don't play a lot of defensive players, and those guys will sit out there sometimes because people just start looking at the stats they're putting up, and if they're not playing many guys, they just get the guy that is scoring the most points. They don't worry about the name on the player as much.
Alrighty. We got Rugaroo in the chat. What's up, Rugaroo? Great to see you back. Fantasy and Frames programming. Saw you on Wednesday on 4th and Frames. Glad to see you're back here on Shoot the Gap. He's like, man, TJ Watt is killing me lately. What's up with that? Yeah, what is up with that?
Dude, he's been getting chipped. They've been putting a tight end on him. And I have to be honest, watching the games, he looks a little frustrated. There's a couple plays out there where he, like in the middle of the play, he kind of just stops. It's like he's getting really mad. And so he's just kind of stopping. And so he's in a big hole right now where he's just not getting the QB. So either they've got to figure out a way to move him around a bit. I know this is not what the Steelers usually do. They tend to play guys where they play them and they just go. But they might have to start thinking about doing some different stuff with Watt to get him free. Because it's almost it's not easy to block him, but it's becoming too easy to set up to double team him to have running backs chip him, have tight ends chip him. So right now it is frustrating. Again, it's like a Bolton situation. Like if you got TJ Watt, you're expecting him to get you a bunch of points, and he just hasn't lately. It's been rough. I'm hoping it turns around, but it has been very frustrating lately. Oh, Will's got another question here. Jorge, I think you're on mute, actually.
I said, so thank you very much. I was about to mention this, and Will beat me to it with, you see Herbig on Thursday Night Football putting up some points there. That was pretty impressive.
He was going to be one of my number one play in my plays and fades, but because of the computer situation, I didn't get the article done because I was like typing it as like the game was starting. So I took out all my Steelers players and all my Browns guys I was going to play because I knew I wasn't going to get the article out until Friday or Saturday. So I was like, I love that play with Herbig. I felt like he was due for a sack and a strip sack. So that he was a really nice play. I played him and TJ in one league because I thought they could both get home. Obviously, TJ didn't have a very good game, but I played them both because I was nervous that I didn't play either one of them or didn't play both of them, and then I was going to be kicking myself later in the week, even though I had other good options at the end.
Let's see here. We got a comment here from Ruger. He's swinging for the fences. Rank these guys, please. Brian Burns, Will Anderson, Kalijah Cansey. I would go Cansey, Anderson, Burns.
Yeah, Burns is an interesting question this week. I saw some stuff, a couple people talking about the O-line, whether the starter was going to play against Burns. If the starter played, and I'm blanking on his name, and I apologize to everybody for not remembering what his name is, but the O-line starter he would be heading up against, Worth for the Bucks. He has been phenomenal this year. So what I said is that what I've read and kind of heard from other people talking about is if you want to monitor his situation on whether he's going to play or not, then Burns is probably a go if he doesn't play. But you got to be able to monitor there and get him in or out of your lineup if you need to, because if Worst plays, he's been phenomenal. I wouldn't want to play Burns going against him. That's just, if he's going against the backup, yes, but not against Worth. He's been great this year. So I'm kind of agreeing with you. If Anderson's healthy, oh man, against that Titans offensive line, I would love to play him. But how much are you going to get out of him? Cansey might be the play. If you're going for an absolute home run, maybe it's Anderson and hoping that Anderson just absolutely explodes this week and has a monster week with Den. Because Daniil Hunter's been awesome on the other side the last couple of weeks.
Yeah. So I know we normally don't do this on Wednesday nights because it's Wednesday night and we're trying to keep it, relatively brief here. But let's answer a couple offense questions. If
might as well. We're going with the flow here. We do have I'll start a question for you. I said Will had a question on something, so I was putting that up there too.
Okay. So let's go with Corey first. Who was first here? Start twos, PPR, Bateman, Alec Pierce, Devon Vele, Nick Westbrook-Akini, Noah Brown. Let me tell you, Nick Westbrook-Akini has been somebody that I've been starting to get a little bit high on. He's not exactly the first read on this offense. He's not like the guy everyone's locking onto, but him and Will Levis, they like to look at each other. Will Levis likes to throw it deep, and Nick Westbrook-Akini has been one of the primary beneficiaries there. I do like that. And then the Dallas.
Yeah, ever since DeAndre Hopkins got traded away, it looks like Westbrook and Akini's has been getting his routes.
Yeah, no, exactly. The Houston secondary, I'm not particular. Let me see here 1 second. I don't know. I would go Nick Westbrook-Akini and Noah Brown because the Dallas secondary is going to get tore up tomorrow. It is not looking good. So I would go the last two. Who would you, or excuse me, Westbrook-Akini and Noah Brown. Who would you go, JT?
Yeah, this feels like a few of my leagues where I'm like, deep, start like 12 man in a 14 team league, and I've got to get some flex plays in here. I'm playing, I have to tell you, every one of these guys in some league. Alec Pierce for me is if you are in any kind of league where you get bonus points for long plays or like long touchdowns, and it's not PPR, it's like half PPR. He's not going to catch a bunch of balls, but all he needs is one deep one from Anthony Richardson. And Anthony Richardson really likes Alec Pierce. Now, really tough matchup against the Lions, and you never know who's going to be the guy that gets the most passes for the Colts. But if you're looking for a home run hitter, Pierce is your home run hitter, but he's also the guy that is most likely to probably score you 0 if he doesn't hit a home run. So that's my thing on Pierce, depending on what you want to do there. I'm playing Pierce all over the place this week. For me, I'm going Pierce, and I'm probably going Westbrook Inky or possibly Valet. There's quite a few injuries to that Broncos wide receiver room, and there's a good chance he sees a decent amount of snap share and looks this week. So I would be between those three guys. And like I said, if you want to go for the home run, Pierce. If not, I'd probably do the other guys. I would lean the lead just a little bit over Noah Brown just this week.
We got Daniel in the chat here. Welcome, Daniel. Hey guys, would you start Otten or Disley? So the question is, how many snaps are we projecting Mike Evans to have in his first game back since suffering the hamstring injury? And you read a lot of the coach speak. Todd Bowles came out, I want to say on Friday, and said, we're going to play him for as long as he feels okay and nothing more than that, which is like, all right, you're going to limit his snap count, basically is what you're trying to tell me. And if that's the case, I still think Otten is the play. You look at Disley playing Arizona. Arizona allows, I want to say pulling it up right now, one of the fewest fantasy points per game to the tight end position. To the tight end position there. So Disley has a little bit tougher matchup, so I'll definitely go Cade Otten with the
Otten's my guy. I love Otten. I think Mike Evans is going to play. I don't know how much. Man, the hamstrings are always a worry. You know, last time he came back, he hurt the hamstring right away in the first half on a deep pass. I just love Otten. He was like my deep sleeper tight end this year. I said, if anybody's like sleeper 15 to 20 and has a chance to be top 10, I think it was Otten. So he's been great. I will tell you, if you're in a tight end premium league, I'm playing Otten and Disley both in quite a few leagues. Like if it's a close one and I'm getting any kind of tight end premium, I'm playing Disley over like a second or third wide receiver. So, and I think Jamie agreed with me there. He says he's got Otten at tight end 4, Disley at tight end 7. So he says they're both good options. I agree with Jamie on that one. I'm actually playing both those guys if I can this week. We did have one we missed. I was going to bring it up. Let's go back to early one that Will brought up. He says some context to his Bolton question. He said he's starting Edwards, Speed, and Henley. He's got Pratt and Bernard on bye. Yeah, I actually see this is one of the spots I'm talking about. I love Bolton. I think you got to play him. But if I have Edwards, Speed, and Henley, I'm playing Edwards, Speed, and Henley over Bolton this week. Absolutely. I think Henley, we'll talk about Henley a little bit more here in a little bit. I think Edwards might honestly be LB1 this week. I think he's got an absolute great matchup. And then EJ Speed, he's going to be on the field a lot. He's made a ton of tackles for the Colts. He's going to be out there trying to run down everybody on offense for the Lions. So I agree with you on that, Will. I'm going with those three guys for sure.
We got another here. Will says, okay, here's a question. Can't see or Chop? Can't see. Don't get cute. Although I do like what Chop Robinson has been doing out of Penn State for the Miami Dolphins there.
I do talk about Chop a little bit in my IDP Plays and Fades article. So go ahead and check over there if you want to read a little bit about Chop. I talked about him this week.
Will has another question. Morig, Chen, or Lake? First two. Morig and Chen are going to be great. Morig has just been playing great in general. And then Jeremy Chen, he's been basically helping in run support. The Commanders have been either playing cover 3 or cover 1. Cover 1 kind of brings that strong safety down to the box, closer to the line of scrimmage, because they need him, because they suck at stopping the run. So That's where you've seen the uptick in his productivity recently. So, and then Quentin Lake, he's starting to go back a little bit in both his positioning on the field and for fantasy relevance.
Well, he's been crazy. He's actually been a tackle machine this year, even though was playing a lot more deep safety. He's actually sliding up a little bit and playing more in the slot the last week or two compared to the last couple weeks. Even when he was playing deep safety, he was getting quite a few tackles. I have Lake in my lineup every week, but this is a tough one. I think the way Chin's been playing, you got to play him, I think. And Morgan Lake to me is a big toss up, only because I have Lake on more teams and I'm playing him. I'm playing Lake this week in that matchup against the Eagles, but I wouldn't fault you at all for playing Morgan over Lake.
Yeah. Okay. So let's see here. Let's get into we'll get to some of these questions, but let's get into some of our money or mirage questions. All right. All right. So money or mirage. Basically, we bring out a statement, and we get to ask each other. All right, is it a money statement where we're all on board with it, or is it a mirage where what we're seeing on the field is a mirage and we shouldn't get on board with it? And of course, if you all in the chat have any takes or opinions, feel free to drop them in there, and we'd be happy to discuss it. But let's get into our first money mirage question or situation. Over the past month, Cameron Bynum's box snaps have gotten so low that he's third on the team among safeties in snaps played in the box, because of which he can be safely dropped in all leagues. Is that a money or a mirage statement for you, JT?
I like this safety group, but man, it is a little bit. I do think it's a little bit of a mirage. I do almost think he's droppable. Metellus seems like the guy to have. I mean, you still got Harrison Smith out there. He's still not going away. They've just got so many guys in that secondary. It's whoever's the guy playing the deep spot is almost you have to kind of give up on at this point, just because it's you got so many guys playing all over the place. I like what he's done this year, but if you have better options or, like I said, just don't have room on your roster, I think you could drop him. And I don't know if anybody in your league would be like spurting out to get him right away. Might be one of those guys you could go back and grab later on again if you needed to.
Yeah.
So I don't know if I answered the question properly or improperly. I think you said, is it money that we can drop him?
Yes.
Or yes, I think it's money then. I said mirage, but I think he's a mirage. I think it's money. I think it's money you could drop him. Got to listen to the question, listening comprehension type of thing. I do. I think it's a money. I think he's droppable. I really do. And again, when I'm looking at dropping a guy, I'm like, is he someone that I think everybody in my league is going to race to go pick up? If they aren't, then I don't feel worried about dropping a guy like that. I just don't think anybody else is going to be out there chasing him down right away, unless they're just looking at overall point total for the year and they're not looking at what he's been doing recently. Then maybe they go grab him.
All right. Second money and mirage question. And this one I'm kind of happy to see when talking about this player, but it may be a bold take. And again, knowing that you're a Nick Bolton fan, this one could be either a hard pill to swallow or you could stand fast behind your guy. But money or mirage, Diane Henley will finish as the best IDP linebacker in the AFC West by season's end.
Man, this is a toughie. Like I said, this one hurts me because I am such a Bolton guy. I still got him pretty high in my rankings, even though he hasn't, necessarily produced to that point this year. Oh man, I do. Henley, you know what the crazy thing that also really kills me in this is I thought this was Junior Colson. I thought this was Junior Colson was going to be doing what Henley's doing this year. I was on him as for rookie of the year. I thought he was going to be an absolute stud on this Chargers team. I mean, I was buying him everywhere. I was overdrafting him in every rookie draft. And I it's not like I dislike Henley because I liked Henley coming out the year before. I thought he would be kind of a guy that could be a game changer. But man, I do actually think Henley ends up with more points than Bolton this year by the time it's all said and done. Now, do I think he's a better linebacker than Bolton? I don't know. I don't think he's necessarily a better linebacker, but I do think IDP purposes, points wise, I do think it is going to be Henley is going to be the top guy. And then right behind him, you've got Bolton and you've got Spillane from the Raiders. I think are right now are pretty easily the three best linebackers in the AFC West.
We got so caught up in questions, I forgot to tell you more about players that are going to be out this week. So let me quickly go through them.
Oh, well, we did get going to questions. I figured we would come back to those guys since we've kind of been jumping around a little bit.
Yeah, we were just jumping around. This is an atypical shoot the gap, so just bear with us, folks. Going back to the players that are definitely confirmed out so far. Jack Gibbons for the Titans. You hate to see it, but Jerome Baker looks to be the next one in line there. Elijah Hicks, defensive back. He looks to be out this week for Chicago. Nate Hobbs, cornerback for the Raiders. Jalen Thompson, safety for the Arizona Cardinals. And this one's kind of interesting. Edgerrin Cooper, rookie, Green Bay Packers, out. And it's one of those things where last week you saw Isaiah McDuffie kind of like come into play a little bit. But it was really Eric Wilson who's been playing pretty well the past few weeks. And we saw McDuffie kind of take a little bit jump in his, snap percentage last week. I guess this could be a money mirage. Eric Wilson is the linebacker to roster for the LB2 on the Green Bay Packers to roster for fantasy. Is that a money statement or a mirage?
Man, for this week, or are we talking about for the rest of the season?
That's a great question. You're hitting me with the money mirage. Let's see.
I do asking questions. I just keep asking more questions.
For this week.
I think Wilson's the guy to have. For this week, I'm still on Cooper for the rest of the year, even though he's out this week. I like Wilson more than McDuffie, though. I just can't trust McDuffie. He just always seems to be that thorn in your side. He just keeps getting in games, and you're like, oh, why is he getting snaps? It's a little bit brutal. But I want Wilson this week if I'm going to take one of those linebackers. And man, I don't know if you are paying attention to Packers Twitter at all, but man, they were ripping Quay Walker after the last game. He was taking a ton of heat from Packers fans. I was like, oh, turning on him quickly here. He was taking a lot of heat from the from the cheeseheads.
Will's also mentioning that Jair Alexander is out. Quarterbacks, yes, he is also out as well for the Green Bay Packers, which for offensive players, man, this was not the week for Brock Purdy to be injured because you look at the top three cornerbacks for the Green Bay Packers in terms of snap counts. All of them allow an NFL quarterback passer rating when targeting the wide receivers of over 100. Purdy could have sliced and diced this Packers secondary, especially with Alexander out. But alas, that's not the case.
Hey, well, we've got to go right into a question here, Jorge. This has to do right with this. CA says, a loss keeps them out of the playoffs. Got to get a win this week. Who do you sit between Debo, Mike Evans? He said Harrison. I'm guessing he meant Marvin Harrison Jr. just once and not twice. And Josh Downs. Again, like you just said, this should be a go week for Debo. And it's like, oh, I almost thinking Debo should sit here. How much are you going to trust Allen to get him the ball? Even with the injuries, it's like that. Do you sit Evans with the hamstring? Is he fully healthy? Yeah, you're going to get Harrison and Arizona up again in that weather in Seattle. I think I'm playing Harrison and Downs this week. Who would you go, Jorge? I'm picking two. Would you play Debo with the backup QB, or do you take the chance that Mike Evans is able to play the whole game and has a big game against the Giants?
The weapons are kind of limited for the 49ers, in terms of, look, it's going to be, they're going to control the game by running the ball with McCaffrey and kind of spell him with Debo in the running game more so in the passing game. So in leagues where you get points for 0.1 points for a first down or something like a Scott Fishbowl, I think I'd still be cool leaving in Debo. Josh Downs. So I have this in my show notes for tomorrow, which you can check out again on the Fantasy and Rams kickoff show. It starts at 9 a.m. Eastern, and we go till around noon, just answering all your questions, just talking shop. So Josh Downs will be facing for mostly a cover three zone defense there versus Detroit, which they like to run a lot. And when he's facing that type of coverage, Josh Downs leads the team in first read percentage. And for the entire NFL, he is fourth in slot fantasy points per game amongst all slot wide receivers. The thing here is he should have technically an easier matchup with the Meek Robinson as the quarterback, the slot quarterback. But since week 12, Meek Robinson has only allowed an NFL quarterback passer rating of 74.5 when targeting slot wide receivers. The quarterbacks, that is, that are targeting slot wide receivers. So this should be a smash play for Josh Downs. If I was looking at full season statistics here, but just in recent weeks, Robertson has been playing a lot better. So I don't know how much of a high upside smash play Downs would be, like in a half PPR or even a standard or non PPR rather. But full PPR, yeah, just because of the receptions. But I don't know if the yardage is necessarily going to be there. So something to take into account.
I think Marvin Harrison has the hardest matchup, like at Seattle. The weather could be a problem. Kyler Murray has not been great. He's got going against a good secondary there in Seattle. He's probably got the hardest matchup of all the guys, but it's just like you worry about, Evans, the injury. Plus you're like, do the Bucs blow him out? And then they don't want to take a chance of hurt Evans, and he only plays a limited amount of snaps. Same thing with Debo. Debo should be a great matchup, and they should need him. But it's like, do you trust the backup QB to get him the ball? So that is, man, that's a tough call there. But I'm definitely playing Downs. Man, Marvin's got a tough matchup, but I think I'm playing him. God, do you go Debo or Evans? I'm leaving the Debo Evans hard question up to you.
I had to pick one. It would be Mike Evans. What does this Giants secondary have to scare you from this organization? And
you're hoping he only has to get a couple big ones. You know what I'm saying? You're hoping that that's all it takes for him to put up a nice game.
Exactly. I'm going to roll the dice on Mike Evans coming back this week, and probably limited snaps, but enough to get you what you need there. All right.
I answered a couple offensive questions in the chat. We had one we missed. Here, I'll pull it up real quick.
Okay.
So, Rugaru said, I grabbed Darius Washington this week. Not sure if I should play him. I have Rayshon Jenkins. Is he healthy? Metellus, yes. Duffy, Newbin, Lake, Blackman. I can play 4. Who are your 4 picks out of that group? I got 3 guys I'm absolutely leaning towards. I want to see who you get. 4. I have 3 that I'm definitely saying, and then I'm going to see what you say.
Metellus, Newbin, Blackman. So then the question is, we have the 3 lines.
One more.
I know. Rayshon Jenkins was playing really well before he got hurt. And if he is back to full health and he resumes a full set of snaps, yeah, I think I'll go Rayshon, Metellus, Newbin, Blackman. Did I say the 4th one? Wait, hold on.
Yeah, you said Metellus, Newbin, Blackman, and Rayshon. I'm leaning Metellus, Newbin, Blackman, and Lake. And again, I'm just saying that because I've Lake has just been so freaking consistent for me in leagues this year that I've just been playing him. He hasn't got a lot of takeaways, picks, stuff like that, but he's been nice on the tackle floor. I think the Rams are going to run the ball. They're going to need help coming up making tackles. I think he's going to be in that mix. So we're a little split on that one, but there's a couple guys we obviously agree on.
Right. Will coming with the question: would you play Newman over Chin? No. And would you play Morig over Lake? No. I would take Chin and Morig without hesitation. All right. Let's see here. C.A. Williams says, thanks for the true insight and weighing all the individual situations with those wide receivers. Yeah, absolutely. That's what we're here for. Whether it's us on Shoot the Gap or all of our other shows here at Fantasy Frames, we like to break it down for you. I like to give you the pros and cons, and hopefully we help settle some questions for you that you may have had before you asked them, and that's what we're here for. And of course, you could reach us, on social media on X or Blue Sky or whatever, at Jorge B. Edwards or JT Orange, wherever, Fantasy Frames are on all these we're on like 9 social media channels. So yes, there are 9 out there. And believe me, as somebody who has to go through all the apps every day, just making sure everything's okay. Yeah, we do have a lot. But anywho, I digress. All right. Let's just get into some plays and fades, and then we'll keep answering questions as we keep going. But before we do that, we should probably play this. All right, folks. So you all are very lucky because we normally don't do this early on in the week. But because of the circumstances that we, JT and I, we couldn't get on until now. Why does my Alexa always go off? And I don't even say anything that's Alexa. In fact, I named this one Echo. It should be even more difficult to recognize.
I don't even, honestly, I don't have an Alexa. I don't even know how they work. It's wild to me when they just turn on out of nowhere. I know my phone does it sometimes. I'll be like, Blixby or whatever that thing is. I'll be like, what did you ask? And I'm like, I'm not talking to you. I'm like, what are you talking about?
Yeah. No, willpower. Yeah. Let me tell you what we're on. Since you said 9 channels. Okay, let's see here. We're on Facebook. We're on X. We're on YouTube. We're on Instagram. We're on TikTok. We're on Blue Sky. And we're on Apple and Spotify. I don't know if those count as social media channels, but let's just count them as channels that you can find us on. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So 8. Sorry, excuse me.
I feel your pain, Jorge. It's like I got my own personal ones, then I've got multiple ones for businesses and everything else. And it's like people look at me and they're like, why is your phone buzzing all the time? It's like just nonstop notifications from the 87 different things I have on my phone. And then on top of that, it's fantasy leagues are buzzing. I finally learned I finally had to go in and start turning off a lot of my fantasy league stuff because it was like inundating. Like every 5 seconds, my phone was like my girlfriend and my son it was driving them crazy. Like, what is going on? So I'm like, at least I figured out how to turn some of it off. Yeah, turn off Bixby. Well, I've never even used it. So like when it pops on, I'm like, what is even happening? I don't even know how to use this thing. So that Bixby just coming on out of nowhere sometimes kills me.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. So unlike how we normally do on Wednesdays, JT put out his IDP plays and fades late yesterday, early this morning. So for those who haven't gone around to it, head over to fantasyframes.com, check that out, as well as check out our finalized rankings tomorrow morning at fantasyframes.com, where Nate Markham, myself, and Drew Scott will have you set up on offense as well as IDP. Again, those will be ready at 9 a.m. Eastern to get you ready for our show. But anyhow, where I'm going with this is we're going to give you some extra bonus plays and fades from the article. And then for more names, head over to fantasyframes.com and check out JT's plays and fades. So JT, let's start with the position that people kind of bastardize. Okay. And that's especially Gary Davenport. If you're watching, the godfather of IDP, he is somebody who hates defensive backs, and then he'll tell me, I don't hate defensive backs. I'm just never paying up for defensive backs. Whatever. You hate defensive backs. So let's start with defensive backs. Give us some plays that you're looking forward to this week.
So we talked about it a little bit, and I was already leaning this way, and now I'm totally leaning this way. And Xavier McKinney, Packers versus the Niners. McKinney's been just an absolute takeaway machine this year. He's got 6 picks on the season, 7 passes defended. He's coming off a season high 9 tackles against the Bears in week 11. Now you add on top of that, they're going against the Niners, who are number 1 in the league in tackles given up to safeties this year. So usually we talk about McKinney kind of playing that free safety spot. You don't want to play those guys that are playing D-ball. He's been DB 15 in Fantasy Pro scoring this year, averaging over 11 points a game. Whenever he gets the tackle numbers to go up with an interception, that's absolutely what you want. Now it sounds like Brock Purdy is going to be out. It's going to be Brandon Allen. And if he struggles, it's going to be possibly Josh Dobbs. Josh Dobbs, we've seen him play great, but we've also seen him basically be a turnover machine in certain situations. I think it's a fantastic idea. If you've been on the fence about playing McKinney in your league because you were like, hey, I got to get a picker or he's not going to get anything for me, this is the time to play him. 9 tackles last week, going against the number 1 against tackles team given up against in the Niners for safeties. I love McKinney. He's an absolute start for me this week. And I know a lot of times he's like right on that verge, depending on how your scoring is. People are like, do I start him? Do I not? He's an absolute play for me this week.
Absolutely. Let's go back and look at a few things. Going back to week 7, you had 6 tackles and a sack. They used them and blitzed them. Week 8, 6 tackles again, a pass deflection, interception. He had a couple of he had the down week in week 9 with only 5 assisted tackles, but bounced back in week 11 versus Chicago. Got you 9 tackles right there. My biggest concern in free agency was not so much his talent, because we saw his last season in New York where he was finally placed in a box safety role. Like, holy crap, this is fantastic. He had been playing free safety for so long, and he'd been kind of like just throw your hands up in the air and you're just like, I don't know what to do with him type of player. And then finally you saw like, okay, this dude can lay the lumber. He can, take care of helping against the run. And so my biggest concern was coming to Green Bay. I'm like, are they going to start all over again and play him in coverage? Or are they going to make him the box guy? And so far they've been giving him a lot of snaps, closer to the line of scrimmage, and he's been the beneficiary of that this season. I'm all about Xavier McKinney. Good choice there.
It's been nice because he is still playing some of that deep safety where you've seen him get some of his picks, but his box safety role has increased big time. I mean, he's almost splitting, evenly between deep and box safety, and he's also getting a few slot snaps. So I definitely feel better about him. Where at the beginning of the year, I know there was a lot of weeks where I was like, "Oh, do I play him this week or not?" And I feel like that's starting to fade. I feel like he's almost like becoming a must start every week at DB.
Absolutely. Who is a fade at defensive back for you?
So here's one of the fades, and we talked about a little bit about it earlier. And that Quentin Lake is a guy I like. Because I like Lake and what's going on with him, I'm fading Cameron Curl for the Rams. Now, Curl's been a different situation. Just the Rams have been in the secondary where they're using guys, how they're utilizing them. Curl is back to 100% snap share. So he had a couple games where he lost quite a few snaps. He's back at 100% snap share, which is what you want to see. But he's basically taking deep snaps again. So it was Lake for a while. It's now Curl is playing almost 65 plus % of snaps at deep safety, while Quentin Lake has moved into the slot almost exclusively. He's playing about 51% of snaps in the slot, another 18 to 20% in the box for Lake. So that really hurts Curl's value. And then if you want to look at Curl for the year, he has been absolute boom or bust. He's finished as DB1 with 22 points in week 7. He was DB1 overall in Fantasy Pro scoring. Since then, the next 4 games, since then, he's only averaged 4.35 points per game since being DB number 1 overall and moved back to more of that deep safety role. He's a guy going the wrong direction. If you look at his stats, you'll look at him and go, oh, he still seems like he's scoring okay. And depending on what projections you're going off of. If it's, something like our projections, or if you're going off of projected points on a platform, he is getting there every week. They're saying he's going to score way more points than he should. I mean, every week it's like 10, 12 points, and he's not scoring anywhere near that. He's scoring 3-4 points a week in Fantasy Pro scoring. He's just a guy. If I have someone else, I'm playing someone else, because Cameron Kitchens, the rookie who I really liked out of Miami, he's starting to sneak in there a bit. He's getting some more plays. He has been really tough lately. He's had 2 monster performances and a he is actually was DB1 last week for the Rams, even though he only played about 50% of snaps. So Cameron Curl's a guy that's got me worried. Even though he's playing that 100% snap share, his role is changing, and it's not changing for the good. And he's got a couple big games early, and he's living off those. He has not been good the last 4 to 5 weeks.
Love it. Love it. Let's go to the linebacker position here. Let's start with Fade at linebacker this week.
Yeah, for me, linebackers, I already talked a little bit about Bolton, so I won't go back into him. And the other guy I kind of mentioned early on was Ivan Pace, was a guy that I'm like, with Cashman back, it hurts. Here's another guy I'm going to talk kind of along the lines of Bolton, and that's Bobby Okereke, a guy that a couple years ago was just a tackling machine. We were expecting him to be an LB1 in most situations. It's not that he's not playing decent this year. He is just not making the plays he did in the past. He doesn't have as many tackles. His tackles are down, and his solo stops are way down. He actually has more assisted tackles, 38, compared to solo tackles this year, 37, which is not what you want out of your linebacker. The assists are nice to add in and get those extra points on the score, but when you're getting more assists than solo tackles most weeks, that's not good. He's averaged 150 stops, right in that range the last 2 years. He's been about 90 of those were solo. So you can see he's on pace for about 125 stops this year. So down from the last couple of years, and about half of those being solo stops. So he's not a guy that, again, is playing terrible. It's not like a guy you want to cut, but he's definitely a guy I want to temper expectations. And if I have better options, I'm thinking about playing him. The Giants just cut Daniel Jones in a surprising move. Tiny DeVito's taking over. I don't think that's going to be an upgrade for the Giants, to be honest with you. This seems like a team that's just falling apart. I don't trust anybody on this Giants team at this point outside of Dexter Lawrence, who we talked about earlier. And this team has been awful against the run. So you would think, okay, they're bad. Teams are going to get up. They're just going to pile, the runs on, run, and that's going to get the linebackers a chance to make tackles. This team has been bad. They've given up, this is a crazy stat I saw the other day. They've given up 11 rushes of 15 or more yards in the last 4 games. 4 games. That's a ton of huge plays you're giving up in the run game, which means you're not, getting people at 3-4 yards a carry and like making stops and keep getting tackles. You're giving up big plays that lead to scores. And so that's killing you. So not a guy by any means I'm saying, drop, get rid of at this point, but Bobby Okereke is not a clear-cut starter every week anymore. You definitely have to look at the matchup, and you definitely have to look at, do you have better options at linebacker, because he's just not getting you the points that he has in the past.
Let me give you a play. That's
okay,
somebody that
I like
it. And he's also somebody who can be very boomer bust this season. But, he's coming off of a 2-sack performance against Philly last week where he had 10 total tackles. 7 tackles the previous week and a sack. Using Fantasy Pro scoring, that's 14 points and 25 points last week. Finished as the LB3 overall. Frankie Louvu. So, it's one of those things where this Dallas team is just falling apart along the offensive line. A player that I'm also high on is oh my God, why can't I think right now? Dante Fowler Jr. We saw his hot streak come to an end last week where they're playing against two of the best offensive tackles in all of football. That is not the Dallas Cowboys. And I really believe both he and Luvu can cause some serious havoc there for the Cowboys in the backfield. Cooper Rush, not exactly fleet of foot. And I just think the hot streak continues with Dallas given this favorable matchup. And again, it all goes back to the offensive line and protecting Cooper Rush. I just feel like they're going to utilize him to, remember in the offseason, JT, we were talking about like the Micah Parsons role in Dan Quinn's system coming over from Dallas to be the head coach of the Washington Commanders. And one of the things we were saying is that like one of the things that Frankie Louvu was good at in Carolina was also applying pressure to the quarterback and making sacks and not just being that traditional off-ball linebacker who just is there for run support. We all know that's Bobby Wagner on the Commanders. This is a great opportunity just to pin your ears back for the Commanders defense and just go after Cooper Rush. So I'm all on board Frankie Louvu this week. Let's get to a play at defensive line. Who do you got there, JT?
So D-line, looking at a few guys. I've got a couple bigger names. I'm gonna talk about one of the guys we brought up earlier in the show, and that's Chop Robinson. He's on Miami. He's going against the Patriots. The rookie, just tons of ability, crushed at the combine. He had back-to-back sacks the last 2 weeks before he got blanked this last week and didn't get a sack. But the analytics are really good for Chop right now. Despite only playing 43% of snaps in week 11 against the Raiders, he had a 35% win rate and a 26% pressure rate, which are absolutely elite numbers for an edge rusher. If his snap share goes up, which I think it will, because I think they're going to go back and watch the tape and be like, okay, guys, we got to get this guy on the field more. I think you're going to see an increased snap share for him. But also on top of that, and we've talked about this a few different times, the Patriots are the second worst pass blocking graded team in the league as far as a unit. They're second worst in the league. And Robinson gets to go up against Demontre Jacobs. His PFF ranking right now for pass blocking is 42.8. He's given up 6 sacks, 4 QB hits this season. Even though it's kind of a boom or bust playing Chop, I think he's worth playing. Even if he only sees a 50% snap share, I think he gets home and I think he could wreak havoc. And again, he's been playing well. The numbers are in his favor. I think the coaching staff's going to see that. I think they're going to get him more opportunities.
Love it. And who's your fade?
Fade for me, this is one I don't know how many people have been actually playing him this year, but he's a guy that we thought might see an increased amount of time with the trade last week, and that is Lucas Van Ness of the Packers against the Niners. I'm fading him. Part of the reason I'm fading him is the Packers traded away Preston Smith. Okay. Trade away your what has been probably your best edge rusher all year. Somebody's got to fill that void. You would have thought it'd been the first round pick, Van Ness. No, it wasn't. He only got 34% of snap share. And a guy, tell me if you know who this is, Kingsley and Engelbert got the snaps over Lucas Van Ness. I've never even heard of him. I was like, I actually had to go and look him up. I was like, I don't know this guy at all. And he actually outsnapped Van Ness. Van Ness this year. So sometimes you just don't get the sacks. We know that's how it works in IDP and defenses, but he has not been good at all. I mean, he's got 3 pressures in the last 6 games. He has only 7 total pressures and 1 sack on the season, 19 total tackles in 10 games. So he's not like giving you a tackle, floor or anything. At this point, after seeing this performance, unless something changes and it changes drastically, Van Ness to me is droppable in redraft leagues, and he's a hold. Maybe see if you got a Packers fan or somebody who really liked him coming out of college at Iowa and see if you could trade him. But he feels like he's losing value quickly. Now, we knew Van Ness was going to be a little bit of a project He never started full time at Iowa, but he was one of those guys who was super productive when he got on the field. He is a younger prospect, so we did think, hey man, this guy might take 2 or 3 years to come around. But man, if I can move Van Ness, I'm moving him for anything right now. I'm really worried about him being a huge bust. And as I say that, Will jumps into the chat and says Van Ness looking to be a bust. Totally agrees with me. Thank you, Will. I do think Van Ness looks like a bust. If you can get rid of him in a dynasty league for anything, I'm trading him away and taking another shot at another guy in the draft, because I mean, this is the perfect opportunity for Van Ness to do something, and he's not. And the coach is not even like he's getting opportunity, not doing anything. It's like the coaches don't even think that he's worth getting out there. So it's not a great situation. I'm sitting on a few shares of Van Ness, and I'm going to have to look to move him pretty quickly if I can. Kind of mad I didn't trade him to a couple people that were hitting me up hard about him before the season, to be honest with you.
Yeah, it's rather disappointing there. You know, when insert name becomes the person who's taking over your snap responsibilities,
I was like, okay, first off, he says he's a crazy hard name to say, which I'm going to butcher, and then on top of that, it's like, I mean, I usually have at least heard of a guy. I mean, I watch a ton of college football. I'm like, I used at least like have some semblance of who a guy is. I was like, I've never seen this guy's name in my entire life. I didn't even know he was on the roster, and I look at depth charts fairly often. I didn't even know. I was like, who? It's like, where did this guy come from? So yeah, that was a little bit surprising to me when I went back and looked at the stats from last week's game.
Absolutely. Okay, let's get into the final segment for today's show, as we do every week. All right, JT, and everybody out there, you know the rules. Who is somebody that you are guaranteeing is going to get at least one sack for you this week? Who do you got?
And I know I'm getting this. And again, this is going out on a limb, but I think Chop Robinson gets home this week for Miami against the Patriots. I really do. I think the athletic ability, the matchup is there. Everything is ripe. All he needs is more snap share, but even he's shown that he doesn't need that much snap share in order to get in there and make plays. I think, and I know I haven't taken Chop this year, and I know that's one of our rules is not to double up on guys. So I'm going to go with Chop this week. I think it's a little bit of a long shot call and play. It's not usually what we do as far as like the analytics and the numbers, but I think he's got a good enough shot to make an impact this week. And I like Miami at home. You know, all this bad weather going around the country, and you get Miami down there, should be decent this weekend. And the Dolphins have just typically, you know, the Patriots haven't gotten owned by many teams, but the Dolphins have done really well playing at home against the Patriots the last couple of years.
Let's see here. Will says, I can't wait until end of season for the answer. I love IDP content. Just throwing that out there to see what your thoughts are. Hold on. So, okay, my sack lunch, you know what? Zach Martin, questionable for the Dallas Cowboys, interior offensive lineman. I'm going rookie Jerzon Newton to get his first sack of the season. I think it's his first sack of the season, but I'm saying he's going to get his first sack of the season, redeem himself for that false start against the Pittsburgh Steelers a couple weeks ago, and get home versus Dallas tomorrow at I don't even know that it's not FedEx Field anymore. It's Northwestern Stadium. I don't even.
Yeah, Northwestern Stadium, which throws me off. I call it FedEx Field because when I lived in DC and covered the Redskins back when they were the Redskins, it was FedEx Field. So I love this pick. Johnny Newton's my guy. Illinois guy, just absolute stud in the Big Ten last year. Obviously fell in the draft a little bit because of the injuries and wasn't able to do a lot of pre-draft workouts and the combine and everything. I think the Commanders got a steal there with Newton. I think he's going to end up being really good. I think he has a bright future, and as his playing time goes up, I just think it looks better and better. I love that call. I hope he gets home. I love Johnny Newton. He was a pleasure to watch in the orange and blue for the Illini when he was here.
I got Will in the chat. Okay, JT, you said you watched a lot of college football. if you had the number 2 overall pick in 2025, who are you taking if JT goes first in Superflex?
Okay, so I just did I think it came out a week and a half or 2 weeks ago for DLF, my 2025 first and second round mock draft. So if you're a DLF member, go check that out. I will give you see, I did my 2026 that comes out tomorrow on there. So that one I only did first round because it's a little more iffy on who's going to be available and who's not. My number 2 overall pick, and this totally depends on your league. If GT goes 1, my number overall 2 pick is Ted McMillan, wide receiver from Arizona. He's an absolute stud. He reminds me of Mike Evans. He's tall, lanky, can go deep, goes up, high points the ball really well. Arizona has not been good this year. Their quarterback has struggled a bit, but he's still been phenomenal. If I need a wideout, I'm going Ted McMillan. Obviously, if you need quarterback, you're in a super flex or 2 QB league. That slightly changes my answer. I still think I'm going GT 1 and Ted McMillan 2. In some circumstances, I'm going Ted 1 and GT 2. If I have to go to QB, I know this is not a lot of people have been talking to smack to me about this. I think Shadur Sanders is the QB 1 in this draft class. I'm taking Shadur if I need a QB. Obviously, landing spot will make a difference. Obviously, I said all year he was going to go to the Raiders. I've been saying this for 6 months that the Raiders were going to be all over him. Now there's talk that the Cowboys are really into him, and now that the Giants are starting to also get high on him as well as they're near the top of the draft. So I would GT's my running back 1. Ted McMillan is my wide receiver 1, and Shadur Sanders is my QB 1 in this 25 draft class.
Did you see that BS hit on Shadur today? That
it was unbelievable. The fact that they didn't throw a flag was the fact that they threw a flag and they picked up the flag and then they said it was something. I'm like, I mean, when can you just take a shot? Even if as a QB, even if they said he was running, like he was obviously throwing the ball.
Yeah,
he went right at his knees. When have they never not called that? Like I just couldn't believe that they call that. Oh man, there was a couple plays in that game. I watched that whole game. It was. I mean, Kansas played great. I thought Kansas might come out and play amazing. They have Devin Neal. If you haven't heard about him yet, he's going to jump up some draft boards after watching this game. He was amazing for Kansas. But man, there was some super questionable calls and super questionable non-calls in that Colorado-Kansas game. And the spotting by the officials was awful. All game, guys looked like they easily had first downs, and then they were marking them a yard and a half short. And instead of being first and 10, it was like 3rd and 1, and then they wouldn't get it on 3rd down. They had to punt. Some pretty big calls in that game.
Yeah, Deion Sanders is a much more rational and calm parent than
I'm kind of surprised he didn't get thrown out. In all honesty, I'm surprised he didn't absolutely just lose his mind, especially when they didn't throw a penalty flag.
Yeah, I would have gone from coach to dad mode real quick.
Yeah, that one looked like he intentionally was hurting him. I mean, it looked like he intentionally went at his knees to try to hurt him. Is exactly what it looked like.
100% agree. Jamie says, hit that like button. Yes, folks, please. If you're watching on X, please give us a follow. Hit this, if you're on YouTube, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button. If you're on TikTok, same. If you're on Facebook, the same. Just follow us everywhere. For those who like listening to our show in podcast form during the week, we got a lot of shows, folks. So whatever show you want to listen to, we got it. Follow the Fantasy and Frames podcast network on Apple as well as on Spotify. We really, really appreciate you all tuning in. Willpower agrees with your call in the 25 draft class. We got Tarzan X. Oh man, I love that name. I'm Tarzan X. It's like a pro wrestler. You just see the mask. I am Tarzan X. You guys are awesome. Mahalo to you. So everybody, seriously, again, not our usual time, obviously, but we wanted to get this show in before the week ended. And don't worry, tomorrow we're still going to be doing the Fantasy and Frames kickoff show starting at 9 a.m. Eastern, where we're going to be talking about some of our favorite plays, some of our favorite DFS plays. We're going to be answering, your questions. We're going to give you up to the minute news and notes as we hear them going through. And I just really appreciative of everybody tuning in. JT, any parting words before we get hitting it up here?
Yeah, just thanks for everybody that actually jumped on at a random time here on Saturday night. We kind of impromptu and didn't give a lot of people warnings. So we appreciate everybody getting in and asking the questions. And again, we answered some offensive questions tonight, which is great. But even if you do have those questions, always come back to the show. I'll answer them in the chat. If we don't get them, get to them, on air, I will get to them in the chat. So I appreciate that. A lot of good questions tonight, offensively and defensively. A lot of ones that I have the same issues with that I'm staring down for tomorrow, trying to decide exactly what I'm going to do. So it's a big week, Jorge. Big week. I'm in a couple leagues that already started the playoffs. This is playoff week, and I got a couple other leagues that you're still a week away trying to make the playoffs. So it's go time here for fantasy football.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right, folks, we appreciate you all tuning in. We will be back. Next week is Thanksgiving. We got to figure out when we're going to
We'll have to figure out the schedule for next week. I got a lot of turkeys to smoke next week, so we'll have to figure out a time. But we'll see if we can get something in. We'll see if we can squeeze something in.
Whether it's during the day or at night or something, we will be back next week to make sure you guys are set for all the games there. So for JT, I am Jorge. We'll see you next time.